All right, welcome back to Logic. I'm Tom, and today we are going to talk about two more logical connectives, namely disjunction and negation. So let's go ahead and get into that. So let's start with disjunction. Um, Disjunction is a fancy word for an either or statement. So an example of a disjunction is either I will go to school or I will get a job, right? Um, Here, in logical notation, again, we would have letters representing the propositions. Here, I will go to school is one proposition. I will get a job is another proposition. And then in between them, you basically, the way most logics and ours in particular tend to notate that is with a V, right? And that denotates the either or connective. Okay. Now, what is significant about a disjunction is that an either or statement as a whole is true if only one of the statements, of the smaller statements, the simple atomic propositions, are true, right? So consider our example. Either I will go to school or I will get a job. That is true if I go to school. It's true if I get a job. um, that's all you need is one of them, right? A disjunction is only false if neither of those is true, right? Let's say it turns out that I end up being a stay-at-home parent and I don't go to school and I also don't get a job. Um, then that either or statement, that original disjunction, is false because neither of the propositions are true, right? And that's pretty much um, what you need to know about disjunction. Okay. Um, and also, well, we'll get to it in just a second. So the second connective, it's odd to call it a connective, is negation, but it is referred to as a connective. Negation is simply putting the phrase, it is not the case that, in front of a proposition, right? So you take a proposition and you put a not in front of it, basically. The negation of, for example, it is cold outside is it's not the case that it is cold outside. Usually we say, it's not cold outside. But in logic, the way we tend to translate these sentences is to say it's not the case that. There one can find different, what would you say, logical meanings when you put a negation within a sentence, right? But so it's easy, with it's not the case that you kind of pull it out of the whole proposition, so you're negating the whole thing, right? Now in logical notation, the negation is marked by a tilde or just like a minus sign, something along those lines, and it's right in front of the proposition. So, the proposition "it's cold outside" might be represented by a C, right? Capital C. And to say it's not the case that it's cold outside or it's not cold outside, you would just put a negation sign, or I'm sorry, a minus sign, right? Or a tilde in front of it. Okay. And that marks that that the statement should be translated as it's not the case that it's cold outside. Okay. Now, what as a logical connective, right? It modifies the truth value of a proposition, and for negation, it basically just flips the truth value, right? So, if it's cold outside is true, you put a negation in front of that. That whole sentence with the negation, it's not the case that it's cold outside, is false, right? It's pretty simple. A lot of this should be very commonsensical. Um, I should say we're going through this somewhat slowly because the more technical kind of notation, it might be a little difficult or a little awkward. But what logic is supposed to be doing is just making explicit the way we think implicitly all the time. So in a way, you should already kind of know this stuff. It's just pulling it out and making it very, very clear. Um, so basically with negation, if A is true, then not A is false. If not A is true, then A is false, right? It just flips the truth value, right? So as I said, negation is considered a connective, but it's odd because it does apply to one proposition, right? So you can have B, not B. Whatever you say, you can put it's not the case that in front of it, right? Okay. One other thing I want to mention about negation is that notice that just in common sense reasoning that there's nothing really magical about negation. You can proving that the Earth is round entails that it's not the case that the Earth is flat, right? It's just a way to modify um, the statements that we say in a way that conveys a certain logical structure. That's it. So lastly, let me talk about negation in um, and how it applies with the other logical connectives that we've talked about so far, specifically disjunction and conjunction, right? So consider the following example. Either you're a mechanic or you're a doctor. It's kind of a weird thing to say, but so in logical notation, we would say like, either you're a mechanic would be M, capital M, or you're a doctor, the or would be the V, and then D for doctor, right? So M or D, right? Now, if this is true, if this is, say, for some reason you have evidence that the person you're talking about or talking to has to have one of these occupations, you're just not sure which one, and you find out the negation of one of those terms, right? Specifically, that the person is not a mechanic, then you can infer that that person is a doctor, right? In logical notation, this would be M or D, not M, therefore D, right? You have an either or statement, and if you say that that either or statement is true and you negate one of those, you show that one of them is false. That means that the other one has to be true. Okay, um, and you can also have negation like within a disjunctive statement, right? So we do this all the time. So just to kind of go on the same example, you can say either you're a mechanic or you're not a mechanic, right? Either you're with us or you're not with us, that kind of thing. That would be a negation within that disjunction, right? So for the mechanic example, we'd say am or not am, right? We do this sometimes to kind of paint someone into a corner. Um, and also with conjunction, you can have negations in that conjunction, right? Negations just give you a not statement, right? So consider the following example. I went to the store and I didn't get milk, right? In logical notation, it would be an S dot not M, right? Um, and then you would just treat those truth values accordingly, right? Um, now, and just to reiterate one other point, um, a negation statement can be true, right? So, for example, it's true that it is not the case that the Earth is flat, right? Um, it's a compound statement, right? So the negation of the statement that the Earth is flat is true, right? Because the statement itself that the Earth is flat is false, right? So negation statements aren't always false. Um, it's just that they flip the truth value. It's not that they make everything false. So that's an important point to keep in mind. It is just a connective. It just modifies the truth value of a statement. So anyways, do the exercises. Take your time with it. It's a small selection. We're kind of moving slowly through these connectives for a good reason. So you have time to kind of absorb it and go through the material. The book is very clear about all this stuff. And I will see you next time. Okay, thanks.